Please go ahead, Santosh sir. We are
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on exploring new business opportunities in United Arab Emirates. ASSOCHAM is pleased to present this webinar in partnership with Ras Al Khaimah International Corporate Center, RAK-ICC, Government of Ras Al Khaimah, UAE. RAK-ICC is a modern world-class company registry center responsible for registration and incorporation of international business companies. Friends, India-UAE relationship are at their best ever, as bilateral trades have been elevated from a mere buyer-seller to that of a comprehensive strategic partnership in the last 4 years. Bilateral trade has been steadily growing over the years, as people-to-people contact has also been on the rise. Indian community, one of the largest expatriate community in UAE, numbering about 3.5 million. India-UAE bilateral relations have received impetus from time to time with regular exchange of high-level visits from both the sides. You'll be surprised to know when the coronavirus hit the world in the beginning of 2020, while some countries were grappling to comprehend the situation, some taking very slow approach, others not really knowing what to do, UAE took pivotal steps to combat and minimize the risk to its residents, as well as the business persons. We all know that UAE has always been a preferred choice for investment by the companies across the globe because of its strategic location, due to continuous flow of new business opportunities, investment-friendly legislations, a solid financial system, well-developed business infrastructure, availability of people resources. UAE is an ideal business location for multiple purposes. Ras Al Khaimah, one of the Emirates of UAE, only 45 minutes from the business hub Dubai, is fast becoming an investment destination by choice of investors from across the globe. It has investments from more than 12,000 companies from about 100 countries, representing more than 50 industry sectors. Friends, I have the honor and privilege to welcome and introduce the distinguished speakers of this webinar to all of you. I would like to begin with our keynote speaker, Dr. Samir Al-Ansari, Chief Executive Officer, RAK International Corporate Center. A brief introduction about Dr. Ansari. Dr. Ansari is a UK qualified chartered accountant with over 30 years of senior corporate operational private equity investing and strategic advisory experience. Prior to joining RAK-ICC, Dr. Ansari was the Vice Chairman and CEO of the Industrial Group. Until 2011, Dr. Ansari was the CEO of Shua Capital, a publicly listed full-service investment bank. He helped establish Dubai Holding in 2004 and founded Dubai International Capital and headed DIC as its executive chairman and CEO, creating a globally recognized investment company with $12 billion of assets under management. He previously served as the group CFO for the executive office of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai. Prior to that, he was CFO at the Dubai Aluminium Company, Dubal, for 8 years, where he was responsible for finance, hedging, IT, strategic raw materials. Dr. Al-Ansari sits on a number of boards, including RAK-ICC, TVM Healthcare Partners, GCC Healthcare Private Equity Fund, Eureka Capital, Hawkma Institute of Corporate Governance, and so on. He also served on the board of Dubai International Finance Center from 2004 to 2016. He is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales and a member of the Institute's advisory board for MENA. He was awarded honorary doctorate by Loughborough University for outstanding achievement and leadership in finance. He is also a visiting fellow at Oxford University's Said Business School. Dr. Ansari, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Santosh. I'm delighted to join you. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Yes. Of course, as you rightly pointed out, the India-UAE relationship is an extremely strong one and one that continues to grow. And I think not just because of geographic proximity, but for many reasons. And you know, a couple of things I would highlight that many people really don't know, but India is the largest trading partner of the UAE. India is the largest trading partner of the UAE. And actually the UAE is India's third largest trading partner after only China and the USA. So obviously this is a very, very important key relationship between two countries that happen to be close to each other, and therefore facilitating a lot of the things that we will talk about today. And I would make one slight correction to what you mentioned. There are over 30,000 active companies in the RAKEZ and RAK ICC portfolio today, rather than 12,000. So you know, Ras Al Khaimah has truly become a global destination for doing business, whether people want to set up you know, operational businesses, manufacturing, industrial, commercial, or create structures to do business globally. So what I will do is take you through the first few slides and then hand over to Mr. Gary Hales, our Chief Commercial Officer. Just to also let you know that on the panel with us today is Alan Bagood, our registrar, who has been with us for several years and used to be the registrar in Guernsey. So for any technical questions, I will be handing over to Alan. And with that, let me start our presentation.
Dr. Ansari, may I just intervene? Can I also just introduce Gary and Alan Bogart and also Mr. Kalra, who are joining us on this panel? Then I'll come back to you for the presentation.
Okay. Vishal, will you be doing that or shall I do it?
I'll be introducing Gary and Alan and Mr. Kalra, and then we come back to you for the presentation.
Okay, sure,
right?
perfect.
Okay,
yes.
okay, good. So Gary Hales, welcome, Chief Commercial Officer of RAK ICC. Gary is responsible for managing business development to ensure consistent and rapid growth across all channels and all regions for RAK ICC, driving the growth of the business in line with the company's overall growth strategy. Gary is an experienced global business development expert. He has managed several teams at the international banks in UK and South Africa, professional service organizations in UAE. He recently set up Equiom's regulatory fiduciary business in Dubai International Finance Center, where he was the head of the business. Previously, he was responsible for promoting and marketing the financial services industry of the British Virgin Islands, and prior to that, Jersey, with the goal to attract businesses from across the globe to the islands. Gary holds a master's degree in business administration from the Open University, and he's also a qualified member of STEP, that is the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. So welcome Gary Hales to the webinar. Joining Gary on the board is also, we have Mr. Alan Bogart, Registrar, RAK ICC. Alan has 20 years of experience working in the Guernsey financial services industry, including as Managing Director of Skipton International. Alan is a former chairman of the Association of Guernsey Banks and former deputy chairman of the Guernsey International Business Association. Alan achieved his degree from the Bournemouth University, MSc degree in corporate governance through the GTA University Center, and he's also a chartered director. Alan joined Guernsey Registry in March 2011 as Registrar of Companies, and in addition was also appointed the Registrar of Intellectual Property in May 2014. Alan joined RAK ICC in February 2018 as its Registrar and is responsible for the registry and act as a key check balance for the RAK ICC offshore business, ensuring rigid regulatory compliance and governance. So Alan Bogart, welcome to this webinar. I also have the pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Surinder Kalra, Chairman SK Kalra and Associates. Mr. Surinder Kalra is a veteran chartered accountant and specialist in cross-border trade and investment due diligence. His other areas of expertise include forensic audit, blockchain, IoT, machine learning, AI, arbitration and mediation. He has over 40 years of experience in similar assignments. He works with companies from India, Japan, Taiwan, China, Sri Lanka, Mauritius, Zimbabwe, Bahrain, and Germany. Mr. Kalra, welcome to this webinar. I would also like to introduce to you Mr. Vishal Pathak, Director, India Region RAK ICC. Vishal has 20 years of experience working in financial services, corporate services, and consulting industry. He has worked on various global business development assignments and currently leading India region for RAK ICC. Before joining RAK ICC, Vishal worked with one of the largest global corporate service provider and was instrumental in structuring and executing various complex M&A assignments for large Indian corporates. Vishal specializes in building and nurturing large corporate accounts along with other business channels. Vishal holds an MBA degree and specializes in sales and marketing. Vishal, welcome to this webinar. So as per the agenda of this webinar, I would like to first invite Mr. Surinder Kalra to just give a brief opening remarks, and then we move to Mr. Dr. Al Ansari for his live presentation. Mr. Kalra, over to you.
Good afternoon to my friends in India, and good morning to my friends in UAE, Iraq. It's a privilege to be on the webinar with ASSOCHAM and luminaries from UK, Dr. Samir, Mr. Alan, Mr. Gary, and Mr. Vishal. I am really thankful to Santosh and his team who have organized this webinar. And I will be taking up very briefly. He has introduced me that I'm also chartered accountant. And I would take up briefly what he has told about the India-UAE relationship, business relationship. There is one very important aspect which has recently developed in the month of January 2020, is that there is an investment treaty between India and UAE, which was signed in 1999, but the same has been ratified through an official gazette of India, Government of India, in January only this year. So that means all those investments which are vice versa between the two countries. Second is that any issues taken up by the financial and operating creditors, all those things can be now implemented, and the decrees can also be executed in India and UAE both. And these are very important aspects which have recently been taken up by Government of India. And trade and other relationship, which I think those Indian companies who are participating in this webinar, because of the recent restrictions being imposed by United Nations, USA, Iraq would be a very good destination for establishment of the business center, either manufacturing or trading. And then Iraq has got very good FTAs with the countries, and they are also in offing with USA and China. So it could be a very good destination as far as trading is concerned, investment is concerned, and the details would certainly be shared by Dr. Samir and Mr. Alan and Gary. So I would not take much of the time, but only thing is that I would certainly like to prompt Indian businessmen to have their investments and trading with Iraq, which is one of the oldest special economic zones which have been set up in the UAE or even the GCC countries. I have seen, I probably have met Mr. Samir, Dr. Samir, when he was at the Dubai center and he came to India. I have a vague idea that he came through FICCI and had a program that time in Delhi, but I don't remember exactly, but he was there, if I'm not mistaken. And then I have good relations with Iraq for the past more than 5 years. I've been working there, and I wish all the best to the entire team so that the good business is developed between India and Iraq. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalra, for that opening remarks and setting the stage for a lively interaction. Now, over to you, Dr. Samir Al-Sari, the Chief Executive Officer of RIKICC, for making the presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Kalra, for all the positive comments. Okay.
Can we begin the presentation, please?
Right. So in the next few slides, what we would like to do is give you a good overview of why it makes sense to do business with the UAE. Can we go please to the first slide? Take you through all the advantages that the UAE offers and then to provide a little bit more focus on, can you please stay with me as I'm presenting this? Can you go back to the first slide and give you a good overview of why it makes sense to do things in Ras Al Khaimah, which is one of the 7 Emirates. The UAE is really a world-class jurisdiction in every sense of the word. It is not just ideal from a geographic location in the middle of the world and being very close to India, where we've got a very, very strong relationship, that also is a safe, vibrant, high standard of living. And many people come here. I came here 33 years ago, having just qualified as a chartered accountant in London on a 2-year contract. Here I am 33 years later, having come here on a 2-year contract. And many, many, many people have ended up in that position because they come here and fall in love with the place. It is a perfect location for doing business, but also for living, for building a career, and frankly, taking care of your family. And one of the key advantages of the UAE that we will go back to and mention a few times is the deep pool of professional resources that are best in class, that are required these days, especially with more rules and regulations being implemented. Economic substance is one area that we will talk about, where this deep pool of resources is very, very important, but also the world-class infrastructure that puts us in a very good place for the foreseeable future. To add to all that, of course, it's zero personal tax and zero corporate tax. You know, in an environment that's changing rapidly, if you can tick all the boxes I've just mentioned, whilst also having zero or low taxation, is a huge advantage. And then add to that the fact that you can take advantage of all the great things that the UAE offers by working and basing yourself in Ras Al Khaimah at a cost of doing business that is almost 50% of that of Dubai. So it's an ideal place for corporate structures, an ideal place for family structures. And the one major advantage that I can tell you, having worked in the UAE for 33 years, is the fact that Ras Al Khaimah remains a small place whereby, you know, access to the senior team, access to all of us, and even access to His Highness the Ruler is absolutely possible. It is a business-friendly emirate that wants to attract more business, it wants to grow, and therefore we have tremendous support even at the level of His Highness the Ruler. And very, very often I take people to see His Highness because he's very keen, very interested to grow the Emirates and the business within the Emirates. Next slide, please. A little bit of background, because it's very important and really sets the scene when it comes to structuring and what we all do when it comes to advising clients. We really do live in a world where there are rapid changes everywhere. And this all started with the Paradise Papers, Panama Papers. These really were game changers and gave the EU, the OECD, FATF, you name it, so many committees and authorities came up and used this in a way to go after the traditional and known offshore centers. So tax and transparency really became very important areas to focus on. So, you know, people call it tax planning, the authorities would call it tax avoidance. This became a key issue where all the authorities were looking to see how do they eliminate or minimize that at least. Transparency became a big issue. So once Paradise Papers and Panama Papers, you know, became well known, suddenly the rich and famous, everybody found out, the politicians, the rich and famous and so on, had assets all over the world that perhaps they had not disclosed. So this really was a game changer, and what started us on this process of CRS, economic substance legislations, PEPs, etc., etc. This is what I want to highlight here is that this is not a temporary situation. This is not something that is going to come and suddenly disappear. This is a route and a path that we are inevitably on. And all I can say is I think the bar will be set higher and higher and higher going forward. Therefore, being in world-class jurisdictions that are compliant with international standards is very, very important. The world of offshore, as you know it, the offshore centers that you have dealt with in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years even, is changing rapidly. And it's very, very important for all of us to realize that, because it's important for our business and it's important for how we advise our clients. It really is a new world. Next slide, please. So the important question becomes, well, if that's what's happening, then how does it affect all of us? And what are my options going forward? And what we've tried to show you here is a list of the global financial centers around the world, the top FDI destinations around the world, and of course India is there, and the top structuring centers around the world. And then to say, well, which countries actually tick all these boxes? Which countries qualify as global financial centers, as top FDI destinations, and top structuring centers? Next slide, please. And from that, you will see that actually only 5 countries tick all 5 boxes. And those are Hong Kong, Singapore, the UAE, UK, and USA. And so already we've gone from a long list to a list of 5 countries. Notice that none of them are traditional offshore centers. Let's go to the next slide, please, because actually when you look at it, you've gone from a long list to only 5. And then when you probe a little bit more into these 5, you realize that actually it's worse than that. Because would you today structure your holding company or your assets or your business in Hong Kong with all the political uncertainties? I wouldn't. Would you do it in Singapore? Possibly. It is a great jurisdiction, but it does have taxation and it's an expensive place to do business. Let's skip the UAE for a second. The UK, well, I don't need to tell you the challenges of the UK today. So whether it's Brexit or whether it's tax, you name it, there are many challenges that the UK faces. And then of course the USA. Well, Trump or no Trump, I think the USA has many challenges, including taxation, etc., etc., etc. Any company that is today structuring, or any business that's structuring through Delaware, is literally handing on a silver plate to the US authorities all its information so that one day they will press the button and say, all these companies in Delaware are now subject to tax, etc., etc., etc. So that really leaves you with the UAE. And let's talk about the UAE a little bit more. Great geographic location, we know that. It is literally the center of the world, and with Emirates Airlines and Etihad, they have made us truly the center of the world. It is a great place to structure and to make us a hub to have access all over the world. Highly compliant with international standards, as we said, a world-class jurisdiction when it comes to banking and legal system. We are now a 50-year-old country, so all of the teething problems that countries have in the initial 10, 20 years, we're over that. We've always been ranked top or top 3 in the ease of doing business and World Government Trust Index, and these are global independent studies. This is a real economy. This is an economy with a GDP per capita of $40,000. That's the same as, I think, Hong Kong, Korea, France, etc. This is not an offshore jurisdiction. This is a real country with real GDP. Of course, a big advantage is the fact that we do have no taxation, no restrictions on capital and profit repatriation. But all of that wouldn't be great if it wasn't for the fact that it is truly a fantastic operating hub. So the high quality of life, the multicultural workforce, 80% are expats, so everybody speaks English, a business-friendly environment, the ecosystem of professionals that I mentioned, The low cost of doing business in Ras Al Khaimah means you have all of the advantages of the UAE, but actually you can do it in a cost-effective way, 45 minutes up the road in Ras Al Khaimah. And a tremendous network of double taxation treaties. We can go to the next slide, please. And because we are not a traditional offshore center, an island that is only built on offshore business, we are a real country, a real economy. It is a whitelisted jurisdiction. We are not on any blacklist. We are not on any watch list. So we tick all the boxes when you look at what's happening and all the things that I laid out earlier, all of the initiatives that are happening to place traditional offshore centers on blacklists and watch lists. We don't have to worry about that. Next slide, please. Whereas all of your traditional offshore centers that have been used for many, many years as structuring jurisdictions are either on a blacklist or on a watch list. So you wouldn't be surprised, maybe you would be surprised, but very popular jurisdictions like the Cayman Islands, like Samoa, like Seychelles, are on the EU blacklist, which has significant implications for doing business. Many other jurisdictions are on the high-risk list. And as you probably know, recently, Mauritius became on that list. Again, gives tremendous challenges for Mauritius going forward, and I know they're taking every possible step to address this and come off that list. So the UAE remains a whitelisted jurisdiction. And again, I would highlight, what you have here is a perfect combination of a country that ticks all the boxes. Let's compare it to Singapore, that also happens to have a well-regulated, world-class offshore registry, and a country that has no taxation. I mean, it ticks absolutely all the boxes. It becomes a no-brainer for anybody that's looking to structure, whether for corporate purposes or for private purposes. Next slide, please. And when you look at the tax comparison, when I said it's a no-brainer, it highlights it even more. So we tick all the boxes for being a full onshore jurisdiction, but we have zero income tax, zero capital gains tax, zero corporate tax, etc., etc. And when you compare to the traditional offshore jurisdictions, it's true. If you look at the BVI, they don't have taxation, but then they don't provide all of the other things that I've just described about the UAE. If you compare to, say, Hong Kong or Singapore, that can be considered to be onshore, then you've got the disadvantage of taxation. So again, it really highlights the point that the UAE is uniquely positioned for such structuring purposes. And that is really why the UAE has emerged more and more as a top-tier wealth structuring jurisdiction, because it allows for flexible structures and strategies that allow you to easily manage your tax planning. It's great for wealth protection. We've now got more, and we comply with UBO requirements, but we don't have a public registry, and there are no plans to have a UBO public registry. And so on and so forth. I see we've skipped to the next slide, but I think it's clear that the UAE has emerged as an ideal location for tax planning, wealth protection, estate planning, succession planning, family governance, and so on. So I think we can move to the next slide. I hopefully by now have given you enough to convince you about the unique and very attractive features of the UAE as a jurisdiction to structure corporate and private businesses. And now I'd like to focus a little bit more on Ras Al Khaimah and RAK ICC. I think we've already touched base on the India-UAE strong ties. The numbers grow year on year, but I think the key point there is that UAE is India's third largest trading partner after China and the USA, and India is the UAE's biggest #1 trading partner. We have over the years seen thousands of Indian corporates set up their businesses with Ras Al Khaimah. We believe it's over 6,000 companies. So clearly there's been traction. There are good reasons why it's happening, and we believe the opportunity is there for us to do a lot more. Next slide, please. And when Gary comes on, he will talk in more detail about the RAK ICC type of investors, shareholders, and people who use RAK ICC to structure their businesses. So Ras Al Khaimah really offers all of the advantages that we just talked about for the UAE. But I think on top of that, we could say that it is a very cost-effective and strategic location. So if we've convinced you to come to the UAE, the point is it makes more sense to then use Ras Al Khaimah than anywhere else because of its strategic location, cost of doing business, efficient and easy setup process. We have a range of options tailored to your requirements, etc., etc. And I'll show you just a couple of slides to give you a little bit of flavor of Ras Al Khaimah, and then we'll hand over to Gary. Next slide, please. Now, one of the key advantages you'll see is that Ras Al Khaimah is also, as is typical with all of the UAE, has strong logistical advantages. We don't rely just on Dubai or Abu Dhabi, but Ras Al Khaimah by itself has 4 substantial seaports. Sakr Port is actually the largest container bulk terminal in the region. It's got its own airport and fantastic connectivity with Dubai. Many of us that you see on the screen actually still live in Dubai and go to RAK every day, and it's literally a 45-minute drive. Next slide, please. I like to always show a picture because for people who haven't been to Ras Al Khaimah, it's good to see what it actually looks like. And we always say it is a great place to work, live, and play. It's got beautiful beaches and the highest mountain range in the region. So it actually snows there in the winter, which is very rare for this part of the world. Next slide, please. One of the key advantages also of the UAE is the flexibility and options that are open to investors. So depending on the type of business that you would like to do and whether you are doing business in the UAE, in the region, or globally, you have options, you have choices. And those can vary from pure onshore, which are usually through the economic departments of each emirate, or in free zones where you can have 100 foreign ownership, which obviously has become extremely popular because we do have 80% expat community, and many foreigners have found the UAE a great place to live and do business, and have taken advantage of the free zones. So our sister company, Rakiz, we share the same chairman, has about 15,000 active companies, of which many thousands are India-owned companies. And very often that's when somebody is looking to have an industrial, commercial, warehousing type of license and would need facilities in the UAE and wants to do business in the UAE and in the region. And then there's of course the offshore option, which is RAK ICC, which is us. And Gary will touch a little bit more on exactly what is RAK ICC and what kind of businesses and structures RAK ICC has been used for. Next slide, please. With all those options, you then have the choice of what type of license would best fit your needs. So some opt for industrial licenses, commercial licenses, or professional advisory type of licenses, or even e-commerce type of licenses. Next slide, please. So the point here is that every type of license is potentially available for you to explore with us or with our sister companies. And the facilities are also available to fit your needs. So it could be a shared workstation set up for a startup. It could be private offices for more mature companies, or it could be warehousing or land for development for where the need arises. Next slide, please. And again, I think to re-emphasize the point that we have advantages that the UAE offers, but you can add to that the RAK competitive advantage, which is primarily a cost advantage. And that, of course, is important to every business. So please keep that in mind when you're thinking of where to structure your business going forward. Next slide, please. Many companies have taken advantage of that over the years. So over 6,000 manufacturing companies have set up in Ras Al Khaimah, and they export to over 50 countries. Many international names that you would recognize. I think on the next slide, if we can move to that, you'll see many names and many logos, some of which resonate with you. Of course, Ashok Leyland is one of our key success stories in the UAE, particularly in Ras Al Khaimah, and there are thousands of other companies that have made RAK their home very successfully. And with that, I'm happy to hand over to Gary. Next slide, please. Gary, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Samir, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on this webinar. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you. And as Dr. Samir mentioned, what I'm going to go into now is a little bit more detail about RAK ICC. Dr. Samir has highlighted some of the challenges that exists globally, and I'm going to talk through a number of the solutions that RAK ICC can offer you and your clients. And I think just having the map there in front of you, I mean, many of you will have been to Dubai. I'm not sure how many have been to Ras Al Khaimah, but it's important just to, I guess, reinforce opening up is that we're not really an offshore jurisdiction like the BVIs, the Caymans, the Mauritius, in terms of being an island jurisdiction. We're more of a sort of mid-shore, onshore jurisdiction in terms of where we sit, in that we're part of the United Arab Emirates. So, so what is RAK ICC? And for those of you who aren't aware, we're actually a corporate registry that's based in Ras Al Khaimah. And we're the result of an amalgamation in 2017 of two company registries, RAK IC and RAK Offshore. So when you look at it that way, we've actually been in existence since 2006. And from RAK ICC's point of view, or Ras Al Khaimah's point of view, we are a growing emirate and developing and making sure, certainly since we've amalgamated in 2017, that we're keeping up to date with all the regulatory and international standards. And that's been a real driver for us over the last few years. For myself, having worked in the British Virgin Islands, having worked in Jersey and the Channel Islands, seeing the progress that RAK ICC has made over the last couple of years is actually putting us in an exceptional position in terms of what's happening globally. So we are a cutting-edge, globally up-to-date corporate centre, which is 100% compliant with worldwide standards. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And it was mentioned earlier about the number of companies, and Dr. Samir highlighted the 30,000 companies, but interestingly with shareholders from over 160. And it's important to note that the largest percentage of those shareholders are from India. And that, just demonstrates the strength of relationship between the UAE and India. And we've got around 270 agents, registered agents here in the UAE. And there's a list of some of the names there that you can see. So, the big four accounting firms, some major international law firms, international corporate services providers that I'm sure you would have heard of. So we've got real, top class agents working here in the UAE, representing and delivering and driving business through to RAK ICC. If we can go to the next slide, please. And really, a question, and Dr. Samir highlighted earlier, why Ras Al Khaimah, why RAK ICC? I mentioned previously about world-class regulations, which you have to meet these days. Those jurisdictions that are trying to be a bit lighter on the regulations or slow to move are going to get caught out. And this is really a driving factor for us as an organisation to make sure we have those regulations and we're meeting what's required. And I'll touch on some a little bit later. And there's a list of features there. We have a significant number of double taxation treaties, which you can take advantage of through RAK ICC. There's the 100% foreign ownership, there's the cost efficiency, some other things, corporate directors are permitted, no office requirements, and we use our currency here in the UAE is obviously pegged to the US dollar. So there's a number of factors features that really do highlight RAK and RAK ICC as being the place to do business. So if we could move to the next slide, please. One of the benefits that we have as well is, the companies that we can set up in RAK ICC are suited extremely well for both private clients and corporate clients. And there's some sort of examples there. Obviously, tax planning is across both private and corporate. There's wealth management and succession planning. We've recently launched foundations here at RAK ICC, which have gone down extremely well. You can own real estate through RAK ICC companies, plan your estates and asset protection. Similarly, we've relaunched wills, IFC wills you can do through RAK ICC. And then looking at it from a holding structures and special purpose vehicles companies can be used for, and corporate restructuring and redoms. Again, I'll go into a little bit of detail on that shortly. And then also securitization and ring fencing of assets. These are key reasons why RAK ICC companies can be used. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an example of the solutions that are available. I'm going to go through all the detail of everything in there. Obviously the slides we'll have available for you to look at. But you can see on this slide, they can be used for purpose vehicles in a private client structure, or utilizing our premium product, which is one of the very popular solutions that we have. But if you look at the SPV, you can see in there, the parent company, the investor can, invest into the RAK ICC SPV, which can pledge shares through to a lender or a bank, and that will help with structured finance transactions, asset holding, a number of benefits of that you can see at the bottom there. Similarly, on a private client structure, I mentioned about the foundation, where you can have the family who can sit on the council of the foundation, and that's proving extremely popular here compared to, say, trusts, for example. It gives the family more ownership of that particular structure. And again, through that SPV, you can own real estate, equities, operating company. And again, it provides that estate planning, tax benefits. The will I talked about earlier can also be in there. So there's some significant benefits. And another very popular product that we have is our premium product, which is in partnership with RAKEZ. And obviously, Dr. Samir talked about RAKEZ earlier, where RAK ICC is effectively the holding company and the RAKEZ subsidiary is the operating company. So that way, you get the benefit of both the offshore, as in the double taxation treaties, etc., and the onshore, in that you can, eligible for UAE residence visas, etc., etc. We go to the next slide. Just looking at some other potential solutions again on structured solutions. I've touched on looking at passive holding companies there. So they can be used to ring fence investments, public and private equity stakes and other assets. And again, I just wanted to focus on some of the benefits there. It does provide an effective structure for ease of ownership and transfer across different shareholders. Again, it provides security for finance based on the corporate valuations. It offers an operating structure for pooling of assets for management purposes and also maintains privacy. We move to the next slide. So here looking at some active holding companies, and again, particularly focusing on manufacturers who are looking to set up a structure to manage their assets or to set up a regional treasury function. Again, that's providing that simplicity of management. It leverages scale to lower costs, and also across those, it's the tax optimization opportunities that are there for those particular companies. But I think if you look at it from a manufacturing point of view, the key part here is it is that gateway for expanding across the Middle East with physical and cultural proximity. And I think that's something to bear in mind. Again, going back to what Dr. Samir said earlier about the UAE being a hub. Yes, it's a global hub as well, but also across the GCC. And you can utilize RAC ICC companies then to expand your presence across the region. Just looking at that in terms of a regional treasury function is a key opportunity that can be that RAC ICC companies are for, where you can redeploy cash, improve treasury efficiency, manage financial risk. And then the other part in there as well is the JV partners, where you can establish holding companies. And an important point on here is the access to independent courts. So we have an MOU in RAC whereby we can utilize DIFC or ADGM courts. And then that provides that certainty and clarity of the legal system, because obviously in DIFC and ADGM, it's a common law system as opposed to a Sharia law that's overseeing the business. So again, significant driver of activity in business to RAC ICC. If we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so economic substance. We couldn't have any presentation without mentioning economic substance. It's the talk of the moment, and we did a webinar last week on it where we had over 530 people register. Poor old Alan, who's on this call here as our registrar, has almost 100 questions off the back of that webinar. So it's certainly a hot topic, and a lot of demand in terms of understanding how that works. And I touched earlier about RAC ICC being at the right time. We're really on a crest of a wave here, because we are extremely well suited to meet the economic substance regulations compared to certain other jurisdictions. And I think the main advantage on that first bullet point is the main advantage we have over our competitor jurisdictions, and some that I've mentioned previously, is our capacity, both in terms of physical office space and access to a deep pool of personnel to offer the required levels of substance. We obviously have the whole of the UAE to pull upon, expertise in terms of legal advice, tax advisors, etc. And we've set up a number of solutions, which I'll touch on in a second, that enable us to meet economic substance. And what we're seeing is a good significant step up in the number of redomiciliations of companies from other jurisdictions into the UAE, because they're struggling to meet those economic substance requirements in terms of, office space, pool of personnel and qualified individuals, etc. So I'll touch on now. If we go to the next slide, we really are seeing a lot of drive in terms of activity on economic substance in three particular areas. I touched on the premium product a short while ago, providing that staff with the office space in RACES, our sister company, which really does enable us to meet all of those regulations. There's also the branch product that we have. Again, the branch is treated as the same legal entity. So that means the RAC ICC can determine that those relevant economic substance requirements have been maintained by the branch. And then there's also outsourcing. So we're seeing where a licensee can outsource it, its common income generating activities as long as those outsource activities are performed in the UAE, and again, we have the capacity and capability here. So that effectively means that licensee can use UAE then based employees and physical assets of those third parties. And we have a number of agents who I mentioned 270 plus, who are in a position to provide outsourcing capacity and capability to a number of companies who are looking to set up here in the UAE. And if we move on to the next slide. So, you know, I've given some overview about economic substance, and I touched on redomiciliations and looking at what are the reasons for redomiciliation. So if you're on this call and you're dealing with companies that are in many of these offshore jurisdictions, you know, whether they're on high risk or blacklists or grey lists, and that's really these offshore jurisdictions, a number of our competitors are under significant pressure, both from a competitive point of view, regulatory and substance. And a number of companies are struggling to find that alternative jurisdiction that, if you like, were traditionally labeled as offshore centers and are facing more and more extreme scrutiny. You know, Dr. Samir mentioned earlier about public registers. If you look at the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies, they have an oversight by the UK government, and the UK government have made a very strong statement that they will be insisting on public registries and information of UBOs, etc., are likely to be made available publicly. We're not in that position in the UAE, so you know we will not be in a position where we have to declare or publicly declare who UBOs are. So from a confidentiality point of view, we sit as RAC ICC compared to our competitors. Again, that gives us an advantage. So reputation is very important, and being able to provide what our clients are looking for is key for us. And you know, what are our major advantages? Some of them I've alluded to already, but if you redom, you can maintain your existing legal status, you can transfer across to RAC ICC, and then you maintain that operational and banking history, access to the common law courts that I mentioned earlier in DIFC and ADGM, and then wills registration. We're doing DIFC wills, as I mentioned earlier, through RAC ICC now. And again, that's proving extremely popular. We can move to the next slide. So really this slide is just highlighting where we're seeing the redomiciliations coming from. And unsurprisingly, you'll see on the slide, the majority are coming from BVI when the slide moves across there, because obviously they have the largest volume of companies, you know, around 400,000. So the reason I'm putting this slide up is we've actually set up a very efficient back office process where we can actually redomicile companies in that seamless process within 7 days. And also from a bulk redomiciliation point of view, we're able to take multiple hundreds of redomiciliations and run them through our process to get them done very efficiently and very effectively, and at a very competitive cost as well. So we are really lined up and set up to continue to deal with the volume of business coming through. And as if we sort of go to the last slide there, in terms of what we actually offer, we are a world-class jurisdiction in a tax-efficient environment. And again, Dr. Samir mentioned all the tax benefits that exist with RAC ICC and the UAE as a whole. We have a world-class infrastructure and a deep pool of resources. So really, we are set up to meet what the global clients are looking for, whilst balancing their commercial demands with the global regulatory requirements as well. We're perfectly set. And going back to the amazing photos and pictures of Ras Al Khaimah, it's a great place to live, work, and play in a cost-effective way. I can't quite compete with Dr. Samir's 33 years. I've done 6, but I can certainly understand why he stayed for 33 years. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for your time, and then pass it back to you, Santosh. I think you're on mute, Santosh.
Yes, that was a great presentation, Dr. Ansari and Gary. It was very interesting to listen to you. I mean, the insights that you have shared with us on the ESR regulatory framework, the re-domiciliation, why companies from India need to consider setting up their centers in RAKCCI. It was an excellent insight shared by both of you. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Today's webinar actually has enlightened us about the business environment, the economic opportunities in UAE, the advantages of doing business in UAE, and how Indian companies can set up the centers in Ras Al Khaimah. So now, if you gentlemen permit, we can have a brief Q&A session. I have got some questions that I received from our participants of this webinar. We have certainly screened them, and I would like to just share with you, beginning with Dr. Ansari. The first question is, what is the minimum capital required to establish a company in RAK ICC? And any specific sectors or business activities that RAK CCI is seeking to attract?
Sure. Alan, I'll hand that over to you. Oh, Alan is on mute, I think. You'll need to unmute.
Alan?
Alan sir, please unmute yourself. You are muted.
Hello?
Alan sir, we are requested kindly unmute yourself. You are self-muted.
Alan, if you click
At
on
the
it
bottom,
on the right, there's a
it is
drop
at the
down.
bottom of your screen.
You can unmute there.
Just put the cursor. At the bottom, you will see that.
Whilst we're doing that, so as far as sectors are concerned, I guess the answer is, what are the sectors that lend themselves to be efficient sectors for coming to Ras Al Khaimah? And because of the low cost of doing business, I think manufacturing is a great sector. Labor costs are low as well, rent, etc. So manufacturing has been a very successful sector for those looking to operate in the UAE and in the region. But also anything that lends itself to exporting into the whole region beyond the GCC, into Africa. We see the UAE as a hub, not just for the GCC, but very much also for Africa. And I've often said to my colleagues in other parts of the world, why would somebody in India or even in China go set up a BVI company to do business in Africa when you've got the UAE that has all these double taxation treaties with all these countries in Africa and the GCC? There's absolutely no reason whatsoever. So sector-wise, I think many sectors, as you've seen from that list of companies, all sectors can set up and operate successfully in the UAE, particularly in Ras Al Khaimah. Do we have Alan?
Yeah, sorry, apologies for that. The button disappeared off my screen, but I've got it back now. There is no minimum capital requirement, so you can set up at no minimum capital.
Okay, correct. So the second question is, can a company employ non-sponsored employees? And if so, what are the conditions for the employment of non-sponsored employees?
Again, I can take that one. The RAK-ICC entity itself wouldn't be an employing entity. So if the company wanted employees in the UAE, it would do that in conjunction with RAKES or with through a branch or a subsidiary company. The RAK-ICC company can employ employees elsewhere in the world, subject to the requirements of that jurisdiction, the employment requirements of that jurisdiction. But within the UAE, the option is to work with our sister company, RAKES, to set up the employee framework.
Another question coming is about the cost. The cost to rent land, buildings, and office space in RAK-ICC. So what could be the cost, minimum cost that one company can look at?
Okay, well, for that, of course, it absolutely depends on the usage, location, and so on. And that is a question that our colleagues at RAKES would be far better placed to answer. Remember, RAC ICC is the offshore registry. So with us to register a company to do business globally, you don't register with us to get offices and land and so on. But however, if somebody was interested in that, we could do a premium product whereby you've got the RAC ICC holdco and the RAC subsidiary, and we can certainly help those companies liaise with our RAC colleagues to find the right location, land, offices, etc. But as a benchmark, as I said, it's literally 50% of the cost of doing business in Dubai. But if anybody is interested to know more, please contact us either via Vishal or any of us, and we will put you in touch with our RACIS colleagues.
Okay, excellent, Dr. Ansari. Another question is, do I need a local partner to invest in RAK?
So to invest in RAK is a good question. If you are investing in Ras Al Khaimah to set up an onshore business, then in some sectors, yes, you need a local partner. If you don't need to be an economic department license, onshore license, you can go into one of the free zones, in this case into RACIS, and you do not need a local partner. You can be 100% foreign ownership. Of course, with RAC ICC, if what you're looking for is a vehicle to do business elsewhere or a holding company or to own real estate and so on, you can be 100% foreign ownership. You don't need a local partner.
That's an attractive one. Are there any restrictions on the employment of any nationality per se? Any restrictions on employment of any nationality?
Not as far as we know, not something that has been an issue in the UAE. Of course, politics does play a factor now and then, and so today there are probably some nationalities that are on sanctions lists and so on, where the UAE security apparatus will say, nope, we can't give you a visa or residency for such and such nationalities. But that's, this is a very cosmopolitan, expat driven country, so it hasn't been an issue at all.
Okay, good. So our next question is about the availability of finance for the projects. So is government or the RAK helping companies to finance their projects in RAK?
Yeah. So again, it's a case-by-case type of question. Finance is available. The banking system in the UAE is substantial and mature. Ras Al Khaimah itself has several banks. So RAK Bank is one of the key banks, and it's partly owned by the ruling family. So we work closely with them, and they are the biggest SME bank in the UAE. And of course, they are also very focused on growing business in Ras Al Khaimah. So again, if anybody would like to know more on a case-by-case basis, we can help make the right introductions. But generally,
Can I add something? Can I add something here? On the finance and banking part, Santosh?
Yeah,
With
Mr.
your
Khan, please go.
Yeah, in fact, there's a very big difference between Indian banking and the banking in UAE. They have an added advantage, not only what we have the commercial banking or the mortgage banking, they have Sharia banking also there, which is one of the strongest base they have in UAE, particularly the local banks there and international banks. Even HSBC has got a window called Amana, and other banks also have a very strong base, particularly products called Mudaraba, Mushraka, and Ijara. And in fact, I want to share with one experience with all the participants is that during the 2008 financial crisis, it was mostly the mortgage banks in USA and Europe. They suffered heavy losses, but not the Islamic banking based out of the GCC countries. They have a very strong base based on the Sharia laws when they give the loan, or it is interest-free banking, what they call it. It is very strong, and that could be an added advantage when Indian companies set up their businesses there. Thank you.
Very good point. Very good
Thank
point.
you. Thank you. That's a good point. Yes. Another question is there any restriction on import or export of goods? Any
Well,
restrictions on the import?
not as far as we know. I mean, there are, again, very generalist question. Of course, there are some restrictions on certain types of goods. But you know, I wouldn't have the details to share with you. I don't know if Alan, you've come across any information on that. But you know, of course, weapons, you know, certain restricted categories, which are the usual restrictions, I would say.
Yeah, it's very much around international risks and sanctions and obviously legal activities. But anything that is legal doesn't have restrictions. We do have customs posts in the UAE. They are active in seeing what comes in and goes out of the country. But that's actually very helpful to the companies because it shows them that they can have the tax treatment they're looking for.
And it's worth mentioning when you know, an application is put into RAC ICC to set up a company, you'll determine what your main activity is, and then obviously through Alan's team as the registrar, he'll determine whether that activity is acceptable or not. But there's obviously
that's correct. That's correct. Another question related to the same question: can we sell our product in the local market, in the UAE market?
So again, for the local market, we would be introducing you to RACES because then you would have the trade license that enables you to trade your activity. So RAC ICC is really more for your international trade. As Dr. Samir said, the trade between India and Africa, for example, or the trade between other GCC. But through, it's certainly in Ras Al Khaimah, it's possible to get that license and enable you to trade across the UAE. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What are the steps to obtain the new visa for the employees? Anything that you can guide to Indian companies? The steps for obtaining new visa for the employees.
Again, I mean, one of the key features of the UAE is how digitized it is these days, and it's got a very good track record of efficient, effective operations. So this can all be done, you know, electronically. It's a very straight-through process between the licensing authority in RACES that will be issuing the trade license and the immigration department that will be issuing the visas. It's a seamless process that they work through.
And just to add to that, I mentioned the premium product. So again, as I mentioned, the premium product would have the RAC ICC, like offshore holding company, and then the RACES operating company. So we have 4 different levels of the premium product that can give, you know, the lowest one has 1 visa up to 6 visas. So that's all part of the premium product. You would choose, do you want, you know, 1, 2, 3 or 4 executive standard, they're named, etc., which would determine how many visas you want. So that would be part of that premium package.
Okay, great. Another question is, can I sponsor my family members?
Yes, absolutely. Part of the lifestyle is for families, and there's a very good education system here. The schools are very welcoming, great medical facilities. It's set up for family life. Yes.
Yeah, I mean the visas are standard UAE visas. It's not a different type of visa or anything like that. It's the normal UAE visa that you would be getting.
Good. Can I transfer my money outside the country more freely? The question.
Okay. Yeah, there are absolutely no restrictions on inflows of funds in and out of the country.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, I think last question, what is the procedure to sell out my company?
To what?
To sell out. If somebody wants to get out of the business, so what is the procedure to sell out the company?
Alan, do you want to give a technical answer to that?
If it's simply a matter of share transfer, then it's a straightforward process. There's the standard share transfer agreement that would be held between the two parties, and the share transfer would be registered with us, and then when we register it, that change takes place. In terms of the actual market and the marketability of it, the other point is we're very well represented with accountancy firms that can do the valuations to make sure that you're getting the right price for the business that you're selling. And the other point is that it's easy if a company just comes to the end of its natural life. It's easy to wind the company down. The liquidation process is straightforward. The removing a company from the register is straightforward. So one of the key points that I want to make is the operational efficiency of it all. We've invested heavily in making sure the processes are smooth and straightforward.
That's good. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your great insights. It was a learning experience for all of us who have participated in this webinar. Now, as we wrap up this interesting discussion, I, on behalf of ASSOCHAM, my team, the industry participants from India and UAE would like to thank RAKICC for giving us this opportunity to host this webinar. We certainly would like to take this association forward in a very meaningful manner to increase business opportunities and exchanges between India and UAE. So finally, while closing, I would like to invite Mr. Vishal Pathak, Director, India Region, RAKICC, for his closing remarks. Over to you, Vishal.
Thank you, Santosh. Thanks, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank all the speakers for the wonderful insight. I'd also like to thank all the participants for taking out time and joining this webinar today. From today's presentation, it is very clear that RAK region is the most ideal jurisdiction for Indian investors, Indian corporates, startups, for setting up their new structures, or if they are having their current structure and if they are not able to comply with economic substance regulations as explained by Gary, you are most welcome to RAK, where you can easily comply with the ESR. So these are the two aspects where Indian corporates can freely come to Ras Al Khaimah. Once again, I would like to thank all, and since I'm responsible for India region, and please reach out to me for any inquiry, any clarification, any questions, any requirement. I'm always available. I'm based out of New Delhi, taking care of RAKICC. ASSOCHAM has got all my coordinates, and they'll be sharing my coordinates along with today's presentation with you all, and then after that you can all reach out to me for one-to-one discussion on your requirement. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So that brings us to the end. Thank you, Vishal. Dr. Ansari, it was absolute delight to have you with us. Listening to you, it was a great opportunity to listen to you, to understand how you have enjoyed your stay in Ras Al Khaimah and how you want others also to enjoy the environment, the business environment, live, work, and play in Ras Al Khaimah. I'm sure today's thoughts would have definitely penetrated into the minds of a lot of businessmen, and they are seriously would be considering and exploring the opportunity to explore the business entities in RAK. And thanks, Gary. Thanks, Alan. You people have also enriched us with a lot of thoughts on the SR and the regulations and the tax and other part. Definitely, it is an encouraging moment for all of us to consider looking at increasing the enhancement between India and UAE. So, Vishal, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you, Mr. Kalra, for your initial remarks and also enlightening us on the various regulations. And once again, I thank our Ras Al Khaimah Investment International Corporate Center for aligning with ASSOCHAM to bring this webinar. We look forward to have more of such interaction going forward, and wish you all a safe and healthy life ahead, and all the very best for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.